I never thought it would happen to me. My name is Sarah, and I was a happy 32-year-old woman living a busy but fulfilling life in Kansas City, Missouri, with my two wonderful young kids and a job I loved, teaching art at a local middle school. My days were full of bright colors and the messy joy of children, both at home and at school, and my evenings were spent wrangling homework and making simple dinners, sometimes with my sweet mom, Martha, joining us for a visit. Mom lived just a few miles away, and she was the anchor of our little family, always there with a warm hug or a cup of herbal tea, her house filled with the comforting smell of lavender and old books. My older sister, Brenda, who was 38, lived a little further out in a big, fancy house, but we were still family, tied together by years of shared childhood memories and the loving presence of our mother. We didn't see each other as often as we used to. Brenda was always wrapped up in her high society charity events and her husband's business dealings, but I always felt that deep down, we had each other's backs, a bond forged from growing up as just the two of us with Mom. Then, everything changed when Mom got sick. It started subtly, a little forgetfulness, a bit of confusion, but then it grew worse, much faster than anyone expected. It was a cruel form of dementia, stealing pieces of her memory and her independence each day, and it broke my heart to see her fade. I tried my best to care for her, juggling doctor's appointments and hospital visits with my teaching schedule and my kids' needs, but it felt like I was constantly drowning, always feeling like I wasn't doing enough for anyone. That's when Brenda stepped in, seemingly like an angel. She offered to take over all of Mom's financial matters and medical power of attorney. She said I had enough on my plate, and she had more time and experience with all the paperwork and legal stuff, being married to a man who dealt with big money all the time. I was so relieved, so grateful, I thanked her profusely, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders, trusting my sister completely with Mom's well-being and her future, just as I had trusted her my whole life. I watched as Brenda managed Mom's bills, arranged for in-home care when I couldn't be there, and spoke with doctors, always seeming so capable and in control, and I felt a deep sense of peace knowing Mom was in good hands. Mom passed away peacefully in her sleep one crisp autumn morning, a little over a year after she got sick, and the grief was a physical ache in my chest, a hollowness that seemed to echo through every room of my life. It was a quiet funeral, just close family, and Brenda was there, tearful and solemn just like me, and for a moment I felt that old sisterly bond reassert itself in our shared sorrow. After the initial wave of grief had passed, I started thinking about Mom's estate, about her last wishes, about how she always said she wanted everything split evenly between us, her two girls, so we would both have a little security and a piece of her legacy. I called Brenda to talk about it, expecting to arrange a meeting with a lawyer to go over Mom's will, but Brenda was strangely evasive. She said she had handled everything, that it was all sorted out, and that I didn't need to worry my head about it. A tiny flicker of unease began to stir in my gut, but I pushed it down, telling myself Brenda was just protecting me from more stress, that she was just being herself, taking charge. But the unease grew, slowly at first, like a shadow creeping across the floor. I went to Mom's house one day, just to sit in her old armchair and remember her, and something felt off. The familiar warmth wasn't there, and some of her favorite antique pieces were missing, gone. When I finally gathered the courage to ask Brenda directly about Mom's will, about the house, about her savings, Brenda looked at me with cold, hard eyes I had never seen before. She told me Mom had changed her will, that she had given everything to Brenda, saying that Brenda was the only one who truly understood her financial needs and could manage the assets properly. She said Mom wanted Brenda to have the house, that she had loved it so much and knew Brenda would care for it. My blood ran cold. Mom would never have done that, never. She loved us both equally always. She believed in fairness, in sharing. Brenda continued, her voice devoid of emotion, explaining that Mom's savings were used to pay for her extensive medical care, and what was left, including the proceeds from selling some of Mom's old jewelry and a few pieces of furniture, was now gone, invested in Brenda's own accounts, given to her by Mom's direct instructions. Then came the final, brutal blow. I learned that Brenda had sold Mom's beautiful, cherished home, the one we grew up in, a house full of memories and love, while Mom was still alive but completely incapacitated, barely able to recognize her own reflection. She had transferred the title to herself, then sold it, then used the money, along with the contents of Mom's bank accounts, to buy a sprawling new property. A mansion, really, on the other side of town, far grander than her previous house, where she now lived a life of luxury. She had stripped Mom's legacy clean, leaving me with nothing but the crushing weight of betrayal and the heartbreaking realization that the sister I had trusted implicitly had used our dying mother's final moments to rob me blind. When I tried to confront her again, my voice shaking with rage and tears, she simply hung up the phone and then blocked my number. My own sister, who had once been my best friend, was now my thief and my enemy. My world, once so colorful and full of love, had become a bleak, empty canvas, painted over with a betrayal so deep it felt like a physical wound that would never heal. I was numb, lost, and simmering with a quiet, dangerous rage. I tried to fix things, to undo the damage, but it was like trying to catch smoke with my bare hands. My first thought was to go to the police, to report what Brenda had done, but they told me it was a civil matter, not a criminal one, since Brenda had been given legal power of attorney. They said it was a family dispute, and their hands were tied. Next, I went to a lawyer, a sharp woman named Ms. Henderson, who specialized in estate law. I poured out my story, showing her the old photos of Mom, talking about Mom's unwavering love for both of us, explaining how Brenda had taken advantage of Mom's failing mind. Ms. Henderson listened patiently, her expression sympathetic, but her words were like a cold shower. She explained that proving undue influence or fraud when someone holds power of attorney is incredibly difficult, especially if the documents were signed when Mom was still deemed technically competent, even if she wasn't fully lucid. Brenda had been careful, having lawyers present, getting signatures, making sure everything looked legitimate on paper. Ms. Henderson said it would be a long, drawn-out, and incredibly expensive legal battle, potentially costing tens of thousands of dollars with no guarantee of success, and I simply didn't have that kind of money. My teacher's salary and single-parent budget couldn't stretch to cover a legal war with Brenda and her wealthy husband. Every time I called the lawyer, the meter was running, and I saw my own modest savings dwindling, making everything even worse. I tried reaching out to other family members, hoping they would see Brenda for what she was and rally around me. I called our aunt, Mom's sister, who lived in Florida, and our cousins who were still in Kansas City. I told them what Brenda had done, how she had stolen everything from Mom and from me, how she had broken Mom's trust. But Brenda had already gotten to them. She had spun a narrative, telling everyone that I was greedy, that I was jealous of her success, that I was trying to dishonor Mom's final wishes. She said Mom had wanted to give everything to her because I was too irresponsible with money, and Mom worried I would squander it. Some family members were uncomfortable. They didn't want to take sides in a family squabble. Others believed Brenda's lies, and some just avoided my calls, not wanting to get involved. I felt more isolated than ever, like I was shouting into a void, my voice unheard, my pain invisible. My attempts to fix things just seemed to make Brenda stronger, more entrenched in her lies, and me weaker, more desperate. I sank into a deep depression, the stress affecting my work, making me irritable with my kids and leaving me exhausted. I saw Brenda driving around Kansas City in a brand new luxury car, going to fancy restaurants, hosting lavish parties in the mansion that Mom's money had bought, and it felt like she was constantly mocking me, thriving on my misery. The injustice burned within me, a constant, smoldering fire. I realized that the law wouldn't help me, and family wouldn't help me. I had to find another way, a way to make Brenda feel the pain she had inflicted on me, to strip away her false sense of security and her carefully constructed reputation, even if it meant getting my hands a little dirty. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about justice, about vindication, about making her pay for what she did to Mom and to me. My final revenge plan started slowly taking shape in the quiet hours after my children were asleep, born from a desperate need for justice and a newfound clarity. I realized that Brenda's greatest asset wasn't her wealth, it was her reputation. She prided herself on being a pillar of the Kansas City community, a successful businesswoman, a generous philanthropist, the perfect wife and mother. I decided to dismantle that facade, piece by painful piece. My first clever tactic was to expose her financial deceit, not through a courtroom, but through a far more insidious and public channel. I knew Brenda had been involved in several high-profile charity committees around town, always making a show of her donations. I began meticulously gathering evidence of Brenda's financial maneuvers regarding Mom's estate. It wasn't easy, but I found old bank statements, property deeds from before Mom's illness, and even some of Mom's personal notes that hinted at her true financial intentions. One day, while discreetly visiting some distant relatives, I found a box of Mom's old photographs and documents, including a few letters Mom had written to her sister about her plans for retirement and how she wanted her assets equally split between her two girls. These letters, along with an old, signed, but never officially filed, version of Mom's will that explicitly stated equal distribution, became my secret weapons. I didn't take them to a lawyer because I knew the legal route was too hard. Instead, I carefully photocopied them. Then, I created an anonymous social media account, naming it something innocuous like Kansas City Community Watch, and began posting general cautionary tales about elder abuse and financial betrayal, slowly, subtly, sharing snippets of the documents, blurring names but leaving enough detail for anyone familiar with Brenda's charity work to recognize the patterns. I made sure these posts showed up in the feeds of people Brenda knew, people in her social circles, people who sat on those charity boards with her. The whispers began, quiet at first, then growing louder, questions forming in the minds of those who trusted her most. My second tactic was more personal, designed to chip away at Brenda's composure and sow seeds of paranoia. Brenda had always been incredibly proud of her garden, a sprawling, manicured masterpiece that was featured in local magazines. Every week, I would anonymously send her a small, withered bouquet of lavender, the same kind Mom used to grow in her garden, tucked into a plain brown paper bag with no return address. Attached to each bouquet was a single, typed word: remember. The first few times, she probably just thought it was a prank. But as the weeks turned into months and the withered lavender kept arriving, always with that chilling single word, I knew it was getting to her. I imagined her looking over her shoulder, wondering who knew who was watching. She started to look tired, her eyes constantly darting, and she began missing some of her regular charity meetings, something she never used to do. Then I escalated it. I started leaving small, antique objects, familiar heirlooms that had belonged to Mom but were never part of the big theft. Things like a small porcelain thimble or an old silver locket, on her porch, sometimes tucked under her expensive new doormat, sometimes left right on her perfect garden bench, always in places where she was sure to find them, always at dusk. These were subtle reminders that I was there, that I knew her secrets, and that Mom's memory was haunting her. The psychological pressure was building, turning her outward composure into a brittle shell. My third and most devastating tactic involved using Brenda's own ambition against her. I knew she was desperately trying to secure a major investment for her husband's new business venture, a deal that would elevate them to an even higher level of wealth and prestige in Kansas City. I also knew that the investors were very particular about the moral character and financial integrity of their partners. I had spent months gathering information about Brenda's current financial standing, the loans she had taken out on the new mansion, and most crucially, a small but significant discrepancy in the sale of Mom's antique jewelry. It turns out, Brenda had sold some of Mom's most valuable pieces to a shady, cash-only dealer without declaring the income, a clear case of tax evasion. This wasn't enough for a big criminal case, but it was enough to raise serious red flags for anyone scrutinizing her finances. I compiled a meticulously organized, anonymous package containing copies of those old letters from Mom, the unsigned will, the subtle hints from the Kansas City Community Watch social media account, and crucially, irrefutable proof of the undeclared jewelry sales, including receipts from the shady dealer Brenda had used, which I obtained through a very clever connection I had made with a former disgruntled employee of the dealer. I mailed this package directly to the head of the investment firm Brenda's husband was courting, a highly respected and notoriously ethical individual. I also sent a second, identical package to the local investigative news team, knowing they loved stories about public figures with hidden scandals. The climax unfolded rapidly. Brenda's husband's investment deal collapsed spectacularly. The investment firm, alerted to Brenda's dubious financial history and ethical failings, withdrew their offer, citing unforeseen integrity concerns. The news team, armed with the anonymous tip, launched an investigation. Within weeks, Brenda's carefully cultivated image began to crumble. The whispers from the Kansas City Community Watch turned into outright accusations in the local papers, fueled by the investigative journalist's exposé. Photos of Brenda's luxurious mansion were plastered next to headlines questioning her charity work and financial dealings. The antique jewelry scandal was exposed, triggering a tax investigation, which led to further scrutiny of how she had acquired the funds for the new mansion. Her closest friends began to distance themselves, and the charity boards, fearful of association with scandal, quietly removed her. Brenda's husband, humiliated and furious, initiated divorce proceedings, citing her ruinous actions as the cause of his financial and reputational downfall. The mansion, bought with Mom's stolen money, was leveraged so heavily that it was foreclosed upon. Brenda lost everything: her reputation, her wealth, her marriage, and her social standing, all in a brutal public collapse. She was left with nothing, forced to move into a small, rented apartment on the outskirts of town, shunned by the community she once commanded, a pariah. My revenge was complete. I saw her once pushing a grocery cart at a discount store, her face drawn and haggard, a far cry from the perfectly coiffed, confident woman who had stolen Mom's legacy. She didn't see me, and I felt a strange mixture of triumph and emptiness. I had won. She had paid for her betrayal. But then, as I watched her, I saw her two young children, my niece and nephew, walking beside her, their faces mirroring her sadness, their clothes no longer the designer outfits I remembered. They were innocent in all of this, innocent victims of their mother's greed and my relentless pursuit of revenge. And in that moment, the victory felt cold, hollow. The anger that had fueled me for so long dissipated, leaving behind a vast, aching void. I had justice, but I had lost a sister, and in destroying her, I had inadvertently hurt my own flesh and blood, Mom's grandchildren, who were now suffering the consequences of a betrayal that had nothing to do with them. The cycle of pain continued, and I realized that while some betrayals demanded retribution, revenge itself was a poison, leaving its own bitter taste long after the battle was won, making a clean slate impossible. It was a victory that left me feeling just as lost as I was before, carrying a new burden, the weight of what I had become to get what I wanted, and the knowledge that some betrayals can never truly be forgiven, not even by the one who orchestrates the reckoning.